We can talk about Lando and his penalty because, I mean, there are two situations there. You know, Max and George, Lando and the yellow flag. Honestly, David, somewhere in the show, if you've got a script or you've got an idea of where we're going to go, they have to be included in this program because, in my opinion, they are, particularly the FIA ruling and the yellow flag, is shambolic.
Hello and welcome to Formula for Success. I'm David Coulthard, and with me today is the man, the myth, the legend. It's Eddie Jordan.
Wow! Can you believe DC and I, we are reunited at the hip again. And I missed you last week, DC. You were schmoozing and doing all sorts of funny things with some celebs in Vegas, and you couldn't even turn up for our show. But, you know, the anchors reckon they didn't really miss you that much.
Listen, I must be having an outer-body experience. Two things. First of all, I forgot to turn the volume down when you did your growls, so now I've got bleeding eardrums. Second of all, I'm sure, did we not do a podcast when I was in Las Vegas?
I think you need to see a doctor. A psychiatrist, actually, because anyone who thinks that it did... Gary Anderson stepped into you, and he was absolutely brilliant. We had a great discussion about all sorts of things. Actually, well done to Gary. Can we reach out to him, DC, you and me together? Because we know how good he is, and
He's
we
brilliant.
know what a great man he was for me. But to step in like he did within a moment's notice, he was in Jamaica, and I'm not sure he was that happy about... I told him he was spending my pension money, and he said he's still trying to find it.
Yeah, I'm sure he was having to deal with all the wheeling and dealing that you did back in the day. Hey, can you imagine, Eddie, what it would be like if you were running a Formula One team? They've got more money now than God. They've all that big push for budget caps. These teams have got more money than they know what to do with. They can't spend it.
But not alone that. I mean, you have people who are envious. I spoke to Bernie the other day. I mean, he's bringing out this collection of cars, and that's worth about 700 or 800 million. But on the reflection, like what you've just described, Gary pointed out the fact that there are some teams, and I must say I agree with him, there are some teams in Formula One who are really not up to the mark. And fair play to Joe Van Newt, because to finish 8th in that race at the weekend and finally get some points for Sauber, I will just take my hat off to him because I think that was a Trojan effort. But yeah, Jesus, DC, I could be fucking seriously rich if I because you know I love a robbery, and you know, robbing the FIA, robbing Liberty, I'd have just so enjoyed it. But sadly, I got out when I'm happy.
What are you talking about? You just did one of the biggest... No, let me rephrase that. You've just done the biggest non-racing driver personal contract in the history of the sport with the deal you've done for Adrian. What is the matter with you and your sickness about wanting more?
I don't want more. You should reflect if I were to say something to you. What could I have done for you? Because you are very average at the best of times. I could have made you unbelievably well off and unbelievably successful, by the way.
Okay, let's just go through that then. Other than Michael Schumacher, who, as I recall, spent two corners with you because he blew the clutch at the top of Eau Rouge.
Yeah, but had the money before.
Yeah, but hold on. Just be patient. He never actually did a racing lap for you and went on to be the most successful racing driver in the history up until Lewis came along. Who else did you make rich?
Well, everybody. Anyone who touched me. I have the Midas touch. The Midas touch. Now,
Ralph's money came at Toyota. Eddie's money came at Ferrari. Rubens's money came at Ferrari. Which racing driver? Damon probably.
Can you open the show and talk sense here?
All right, okay. You can tell EJ, ladies and gentlemen, is getting uncomfortable because he's now moving the conversation on. Right, let's move it on to Qatar. What a topsy-turvy race. And actually, shout out, as you said, to Guangzhou. I was on the flight with them today. I'm currently speaking to you from Dubai. And yeah, he was loving the fact that with one Grand Prix to go, things have finally come right. And it's a shame that the sort of Chinese dream hasn't worked in that he's a perfectly good racing driver. Valtteri's a Grand Prix winner, and, Joe hasn't been blown away or embarrassed in his role. So hopefully he will find another role within Formula One, young enough maybe to have the chance to come back. But if we just go, let's start with the headlines. Max Verstappen, once again, from the mediocrity, if I can call it that, of the sprint race, to the brilliance of finding a pole, to the interference of the FIA with a one-place grid penalty, to converting second to a lights to flag victory.
Brilliant.
Absolutely. I realise me just casting my arms out and not saying anything doesn't work well in a podcast if people are listening to this, but it was me sort of reflectively going, wow, what a performance. Brilliant.
Nothing like Brazil, which was extraordinary, but nevertheless brilliant. And you could see I loved the way he bossed the second place on the grid. It was absolutely a foregone conclusion that he was going to absolutely squeeze George. And the second part, because he had a bit of a needle with George, we can talk about in a second, because I think we need to do that. He squeezed George, and then when Lando came up the inside, poor Lando said, Jesus, I better get out of here because I know what's going to happen if I don't. And he did. And fair play to Lando. He decided to take his chances later on, and we can talk about Lando and his penalty, because, there are two situations there. Max and George, Lando and the yellow flag. Honestly, David, somewhere in the show, if you've got a script or you've got an idea of where we're going to go, they have to be included in this program, because in my opinion, they are, particularly the FIA ruling and the yellow flag, is shambolic.
Well, let's start with that. Let's get straight into that, because I think a lot of people were confused, frustrated, just generally left feeling another Grand Prix where we don't quite understand the penalties at play. Now, in fairness to the stewards, they just have a reference of what happened last time, what's the penalty, most of the time. There have been, of course, occasions where they've applied a penalty that seems not to fit the crime. And I think if we start with Lando, the replay of when the yellow board became illuminated, and then that would have been illuminated in his cockpit display, was incredibly late. And given that he's looking down a straight, following 1.8 seconds behind Max, not seeing any incident, he could be quite rightly, passed for assuming that it was a mistake, a technical error. Because let's be honest, there was a technical error with the safety car in that the lights wouldn't go out. Apparently, the rear wing was blocking the place where the drivers can normally see when the lights go out on the safety car, due to a bit of marketing and media. It comes down to what is fair and reasonable. And it just didn't seem fair and reasonable that he was given the 10-second stop-go. Yes, he came back and got a point, but he deserved more because he didn't endanger anyone. He didn't, 2 points, but he didn't endanger anyone. There was no marshals on the track, and he had clear sight of the straight all the way down to the corner. So what the hell is going on? It just doesn't feel right.
David, it's shambolic. I've never seen so many good people. Mayor is gone. His previous Vidic is gone. Everyone is gone. What is going on with the FIA? Look, I reach out to you. I actually really do like you, Mohammed. I've known you 35 years. For Christ's sake, get a grip of what's going on in the FIA. Yes, I may get banned from going to the Grand Prix. I don't care. I just do not see that the FIA is behaving properly. The stewards are behaving properly. It was wrong. Every person in that team in McLaren should feel aggrieved. And the reason being that it's to mitigate your stances. You've got to see what the other side. They have on many occasions said, we'll investigate after the race. Isn't that what happens many times? Did they do that? No. They didn't apply that, even though the race was getting close to the end. They decided that they wanted to. People will say, the conspiracy people in the group will say, ha, now that's the decision. They are trying desperately to help Ferrari. That's the conspiracy people. I'm not one of those, but nevertheless, it has to be discussed. With regard to the yellow flag, it was shocking. That is a case that must be debated when there is a defence, there is prosecution, and every right, McLaren had every right to be able to defend themselves, to put forward the mitigation as to what was the situation. I will just leave you with one question. I remember going, immediately after 9/11, we were the first people, Bernie brought us back to Indianapolis, we were the first international sports program ever to go into America. And we did. And I remember being so overjoyed we finished fourth. But it was taken away from us because they said we passed under the yellow flag. So in mitigation, at least we got the chance to go and prove and show the case. As it happens, I think it was a slam dunk against us, but I actually managed to wheedle my way through the stewards and to get it put aside, and we did retain our fourth place. But I'm saying everybody in life, in any jurisdiction in the world, there has to be a fairness. And the fairness is that the mitigation and the right to be able to defend yourself, that is fundamental in the world. And I think that Lando was deprived of that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the FIA president had a letter sent by the drivers prior to Las Vegas asking for greater transparency, how the FIA spend the fines that are applied to the drivers. In many cases, the drivers do pay that directly. And they also urged him to adopt a more respectful approach on matters such as swearing and wearing jewellery, and asked to be treated like adults. And apparently, in an interview in Autosport, he had said, with all respect, I am a driver. I respect the drivers. Let them go and concentrate on what they do best, which is race. Now, that is exactly the sort of condescending response that pisses people off nowadays. I wouldn't claim to be a driver. I'm an ex-driver. And as far as I know, the president is an ex-driver. So the best people to know what it is to be a driver, especially a Formula One driver, and this letter came from the Formula One drivers, is the Formula One drivers. And that's what worries me, to be dismissed in a way like you're just your opinion doesn't matter. We revere these guys. We celebrate these guys. The Drivers' Championship is what gets all of the publicity. And then on the other hand, senior people want to go, just get on and drive the car. I never experienced with Frank Williams, Ron Dennis, or Mr. Mateschitz, and Christian as the team principal, I never once was ever treated like a child, even when I clearly had peed on the carpet in as much that I had taken four wheels off the race car. Not once did they ever go, what were you thinking? What were you doing? I suspect you were the same, in that once the crash has happened, it's happened. I know well that you've shared your stories where you've said, by an example, Ralph, you'd said if he didn't get points, you needed to replace him. But that was because you needed the points to get the financial reward to keep your team afloat. But, did you ever, if the drivers had, crashed in qualifying, bring them in and give them a dressing down if they were doing it in the quest of speed? And as you know, as an ex-racing driver, not a driver, an ex-racing driver like me, accidents will happen.
David, you're absolutely spot on. When you have a group of celebrated people who are absolutely at the pinnacle of their sport, and they are not allowed to have a say and are dismissed out of question, the person who suffers here is Mohammed. He's going up for an election soon. And I would have thought he needs to embrace the drivers. At least, he should open a dialogue with them or discuss them and say, okay, give me three of your selected. Who are the guys who are on the board or who are the main people on the board? If it's Lewis and if it's Alonso and it's this guy, bring them to me and we'll have a meeting in Abu Dhabi. Or we'll have a meeting. No. So it's put to one side. Look, you have wars throughout this world. And if we had more dialogue between the protagonists in these wars, we might not have the wars that we have. The problem is people get staunch, hardcore values in their head and they won't move. And that's the problem here, that between the drivers, there's a standoff between the drivers and the FIA, and that needs to stop.
Well, if it's a Mexican standoff, Checo Perez might come in and play a role because, you know, again, didn't get to the finish, didn't get points. It's actually, we've said this many times, this isn't show friends. Checo is a very good human being, but it's painful to watch the resistance to the facts. And I can only assume it's a management play. You know, Julian Jacobi is his manager. Julian, we know and respect for many, many years. Intelligent, good manager. But his job is to, you know, make sure the money's there. So I can only imagine it's about trying to negotiate the biggest payoff possible to get him to go of his own accord rather than to basically just say, okay, we're paying you whatever we'd agreed to pay you for next year, but we're not giving you a race car and go sue us, which could happen. But it would be such a shame if that was the standoff between Checo's management and Red Bull Racing. If it came to that, I would lose a little bit of respect for Julian and Checo, because at the end of the day, the data doesn't lie. If there's a contract, then of course a contract should be honoured by a negotiation. But hopefully they can do that in an adult way rather than, you've hurt my feelings, I'm suing you.
David, the one thing about Gary Anderson last week, he came up with an unbelievable stat. I don't know what the figure was then, but I've actually worked it out now. I think it's a gap of 277 points between where we are with Max Verstappen's haul in this year's championship, with one race to go, and Perez. And I dare say that Perez is not going to blow off Max the next race. So it's going to be 277 and growing. So there is nowhere even close to that. I'm embarrassed for Checo because I like the guy. He's a smashing person to be with. But are you telling me he's angling and fighting for a place in the team for next year? I would say that it's not a chance. But I put some blame. I put some blame on the team, and I put some blame on Max, because I know, and you know, that Max put pressure on Christian, that he wanted at all costs. He did not want He did not want Carlos Sainz in the car. He wanted Checo in the car because he knew he could beat him. And to be fair, Max has to just think about that a little bit. Christian has to think about that. They will deny it. But they are, in my opinion, what I believe. It's just my belief that there was a situation where it was easier to keep Checo in the car rather than consider a position where it might be better the team where they would get a Constructors title next year.
Well, yeah, look, you've got your crystal ball and your finger on pulses that I don't have, so I don't know.
Oh, but David, you must know that. You must know that that's the story.
I don't know the facts behind it, EJ, but clearly a contract's been entered into for 25, which did surprise me at the time. I, in my career, was not the best racing driver, I know that, but I think the longest contract I ever had was a 2-year contract. Most of my contracts were year by year. So, and I was never 200 odd points or whatever the equivalent was behind my teammate. Let's move it along, as we'll find out in time.
David, can I give you, just to console you, your brow? I thought you were a great racing driver. Anyone who can win multiple Grand Prix and into the teens, 13 is a 13, and by your own volition, you should have said it should have been another 13 on top. So let's say 26 Grand Prix that you won.
Hey, look,
I adore you, David. I'll be first there to compliment you.
I'll take 16 because I moved over for 3 for my teammates. And then there was others I was leading.
Why do you have to repeat all that shite again?
Because you brought it up and, you came out with 26. Right. Other talking points. Lando, very apologetic to the team for the yellows. I love how he wears his heart on his sleeve. I'm not really sure he needs to apologise.
No.
The timing of that. Therefore, then, if you agree with that, let's move on to George Russell. Max was apparently very, very open in his. Basically, he went that he found George to be two-faced, and that he was not at all happy with the fact that he said that he was always being very polite in front of the cameras, but in person he's completely different. I can't stand that, and it's better for him to fuck off. I don't want to get involved in this. Well, in fairness to Max, he says what he thinks. Look, I can't judge whether that statement's correct or not. I find George professional, polite, funny, engaging. I haven't raced with him, so did I feel that he was playing to the referee in qualifying when they were doing the warm-up laps? Yes, but he's not the first to do that.
That's true.
They all do that because they know that the referee's listening. So I'm not really sure you can fault him for that. And anyway, it got neutralised once the race started. What's your general feel on that?
Well, first of all, there was absolutely no doubt in my mind that Max was going to do George on the first corner, come what may. I didn't care because he obviously was upset. When you come on radio, television, and you can say he can fuck right off, you know that there's a bit of animosity going on there, that they're not, well, let's say when they're both, and they both live within a half a mile of each other in Monaco. I'm trying to figure out when they're both in Cipriani's or wherever they might be, the SAS Cafe, who's going to give their seat up to the other. I can't imagine there's going to be much love lost there. But anyway, never mind. It all adds to the intrigue and it gives us things to talk about on the podcast. However, it's a shame. It's a shame. If Max feels that way about George, then I want to hear George's side of the story before we make comment. But I have to say, dear, oh dear, it happened. And I can see why Max was upset, but I can see why George fought his corner. He had a chance to claim pole. Pole is one of those things that you add to your resume, isn't it? You actually tot it up because everyone says that this is the races he won, these are the poles he had. So who's to say? I'd rather hear the full outcome, and hopefully at Abu Dhabi at the press conference, George will be asked about this.
No, there's no question he will. We've got so many talking points, actually. A quick comment on, looks like Ocon is out at Alpine. Great for Jack Doohan to get in and a track he knows. He's tested there in Formula One. He's fit and ready. Ocon has been a fast racing driver for them, but his future's at Haas. All of that kind of makes sense, that he would stand down a race early and he'll gain something from that. I guess he'll get released from his contract that'll enable him to engage with Haas earlier. So it's a trade, and it's something that I think probably is able to happen because Flavio's there, and Flavio makes things happen.
Well, first of all, I think before we get into Ocon and Jack Doohan, I think full credit to Gasly. Yet again, he did a first-class race. He kept Sainz at bay right to the very end. He's becoming a class act. David, he is a surprise.
You like any driver that's the same height as you. I've realised that. Any driver who's little.
Actually, I think he might even be taller than me. Anyway.
Not if you're standing on your wallet.
And he's probably richer than both of us together, DC, which probably pisses you off more. But anyway.
Really? Have you lost all your money since the last podcast?
Oh dear, here we go again. So the next thing is Ocon. I'm surprised, particularly after what we saw in Brazil. Okay, it's unlikely to rain in Abu Dhabi, and it's unlikely that the Alpine will be where it should be. Nevertheless, it'll be nice, and well done to you. Mick Doohan, who is one of our real close mates, both of us, where we've consumed several bottles of nice red wine and in the beef bar and various other places in Monaco. So his son, and incidentally, in case of the anchors don't know who Mick Doohan, he is 5 times in a row world champion, 500 MotoGP. Oh my God, what a legend. His son will make his debut in Abu Dhabi this weekend, I believe. And so we're all very, 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 very keen to make sure he does well.
the fact that you threw the extra very in there reminded me of my father. My father, if he likes the extra very. If my dad likes something, I'll say, how was he loves music, and so he goes to concerts. And I go, how were the band? He'll go, very, very, very good. 3 veries means so you just did the 3 very thing.
Well, if you could allocate me alongside by your dad, I'd be very happy, because I know the appreciation that you have for your father. Does that make me special, DC?
You're special, for sure. Right, we have got to get into the confusing story of Lewis Hamilton. Really difficult weekend for him, off the back of what was a great weekend in Vegas a week before. I'm worried. And we've, at this risk of repeating ourselves, we've said this before, those that are just diehard Lewis fans will not see anything other than conspiracy, and he's still at his peak of performance. But I don't buy that. Mercedes and all the Formula One teams deliver within engineering capabilities and crash damage capabilities as equal an engineering opportunity as is possible, because there's no such thing as exactly the same in engineering. There's always going to be tolerances. But it just feels that this car doesn't suit Lewis. Every car suited Lewis in the past. He is one of those true stars of the sport where, irrespective of the regulation, the tyres, the weather conditions, he just performs. So the fact that he hasn't been performing, I think he's been out-qualified 18 times this year, is deeply worrying. And I'm hoping, a little bit like when Superman puts on the red cape, putting on the Ferrari overalls, which will be coming around very quickly, 4 weeks or so after he finishes in Abu Dhabi, if not before. And then he'll have 2 months to get ready for the first Grand Prix. I'm hoping that puts him back on the pitch, because right now he's looking a shadow of his former self.
DC, I'm going to ask you a question. You're Ferrari. You're Fred, and you're John, who runs the whole empire of Agnelli's group, and have invested a huge amount of money. And reportedly, he's on ridiculously fantastic, brilliant money, reportedly 100 million a year. So he is, at this current stage, he is the greatest thing in success-wise in Formula One. Lewis is. He is not performing. And I don't care whether the car is good, bad, or indifferent. His teammate, just like Max is doing to Perez, he's completely dominating him. I have this word that I use a huge amount in my life, both when I'm putting my arm around somebody, when I'm trying to motivate them, when I'm trying to get that extra little yard, that extra inch. I said, watch my brow. Believe. It's called believe. If you don't believe 100%, you're fucked. Do you understand that? Because belief, 99.9% means that there is that tiny little thing in there knocking on your head that gives you the things that maybe, I don't really have that confidence. I don't really have the ability. And at the moment, what I heard from Lewis, I'm not fast enough anymore. They were the words, I think. Honestly, if I was Ferrari, I would say, close the book, find a way out. That's it. I think also, if it's a little message to you, Lewis, if you're out there, always remember in life, you've got your music, you've got your fashion, you've got all sorts of other things. You are, in most people's view, the greatest driver of all time. Please remember what I'm going to say to you. Always, always think about the best exit. And this is the time to take the money off the table. Go.
Yeah, I think that I totally concur with how he's viewed. And when asked in commentaries and various other interviews about the fact that 8th title didn't come and the controversy around it, I firmly believe he could have been a 9-time, 10-time world champion. He's been close enough on several occasions. But I actually don't think it matters. If he has one more championship, it will not put him, in my mind, any higher than the brilliant racing driver he has been, and hopefully he will continue to be. So it's interesting that there's an element of people going, well, to be the best, you need to have won more than everyone else. That's just very simplistic view on things, because other drivers who were incredible of their generation have only maybe won a couple of world championships, but they had a much shorter career, or they sadly were killed, or whatever it is. So, yeah, I think I really admire he's evergreen, isn't he? He looks still like he's 30, but he's sounding like he wants to be somewhere else, and that's the painful thing.
When Max had all of the issues with the stewards, you could see in his mind he has thought about the exit. It's not there. The confidence is still there, and he still believes. But he's also said, if I get fucked around too many times by these idiots in the FIA, I'm out of here. And that's his attitude. Now, the thing is that Max could turn out to be a 10 times world champion. And where does that leave Lewis? Fact is, Lewis, you are an amazing ambassador. We absolutely adore you. But don't put yourself in a position where we think less of you because you're marking time out at Ferrari. That's all I will say.
Okay, let us, just on that Max thing and the FIA, reflect on the rumour at the weekend was that the FIA gala, where the top three are required to turn up and pick up the trophies, is in Rwanda. Now, you're moving off to South Africa for your winter. You love it down there, and it's great. Rwanda is not the work of moments to get to, and you fund yourself going there. It's not like you get a kickback from the FIA and they buy you a plane ticket. So the rumour was that the FIA had made it clear that there would be a sizable fine for Max if he didn't go to the gala, which I think is the weekend after Abu Dhabi. So you get back from Abu Dhabi, go home, start to recharge, take some time out, and then you get on a flight again to East Coast of Africa. Nothing against Rwanda, but it's not as convenient as nipping to London or Paris or Geneva, where the teams and the FIA are based. And apparently next year, the FIA gala's in Macau. So I'm not really sure where that sits when it comes to sustainability. But two things there. I wonder if there is a fee, a fine that Max will go, I'm prepared to pay that, not to spend a night of my life and how many hours would it be on a flight to get to Rwanda? 7, 8 hours?
Well, no, it will be struggle. I don't know whether there is direct or not, but you might have to go to Joburg or Addis Ababa or wherever it is. Look, let's assume there is a direct flight. If whatever it is, the good thing is that it's not jet lag, because it's more or less in the same lines of longitude. And from that point of view, that's okay. But at the end of the day, it's at least 3 days. Do not think it's just 1 day, it's 3 days. But even in a private flight, because, Max is not going to get up and get into business class or cattle class in any old plane. He's going to go there privately, isn't he? And so you start totting up that figure. I mean, I just think it's wrong that the FIA, for their glory, aren't paying. I really do.
Yeah, well, I think that would fall on deaf ears given all the previous conversations. But we'll watch that with interest, and I guess Max will make a decision based on what he thinks is right for his mental health.
But he will go. He will go.
His physical
I have
health.
a belief he'll go.
Yeah, it's not the most dynamic of events. I hosted it a couple of times, and I managed to shave off about 40 minutes from the run time.
And 40 grand, did you say, David?
40 minutes.
40 grand.
Minutes of running time by simply taking out their desire to want to clap on the winner and then clap the winner off of each award. As soon as the winner's picked up their trophy and they're walking off stage, I said, let's just start getting into announcing the next person. Because otherwise, the beginning of the night, everyone's, by the end of the night, they're going, it's like you go to a dinner and you're basically a clap machine waiting. There's 100 people going up and down to the stage. But anyway, we will watch that with interest. EJ, before we wrap this episode up, was there anything else that stood out to you from either reflection on Las Vegas or more importantly, the race in Qatar?
Max bossed that, didn't he? I mean, that for me, it was another tick in the box as to why he is a cut above everybody else, and added to already what I believed for a long time, how good he was. And then it just endorsed even however much more, but it endorsed my belief of what went on at Brazil. The guy is above anyone else in Formula One, and I promise you, I can guarantee you that as much as Christian Horner and his designers and the technical people, his car was very, very good to get pole position or near enough people. But however, I do not believe it's as good as the McLaren, and I probably, in the situation, probably don't believe it was good as the Ferrari. However, Max is that good that Christian Horner has been brilliant to make sure he stays, and there's absolutely no doubt that I think Max will be in the shake-up next year.
Yeah, it was an incredible, incredible weekend. And lovely people, got to say. Qatar, anyone who's never been there, it's a very easy Grand Prix in the location of the racetrack and the various hotels and the remnants of what they did for the World Cup. Very, very nice. Very, very, very nice. Right, EJ, and to our dear anchors.
You must have got very well paid then, DC. Just as a matter of interest, the anchors would like to know, you went off and did this programme for 40 grand or whatever you said it was.
I never said a number,
What is
DJ.
your appearance fee now? You wouldn't get out of bed for 40 grand, I reckon.
You know, I don't like to talk about the work I do for charity any more than the work I do
Begins
for business.
at home, DC. Adios.
Adios. Well, remember, dear anchors, you can get in touch with us on social media at F1 for Success and send your questions in to ffs@whisper.tv. That's all from me, and thankfully, that's all from the Growler.
Oh, am I the Growler? Yes, that's the new name. I might even be my nickname going forward.